All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into a topic that sounds like it's straight out of a science fiction novel. Think iron tubs, invisible forces, and even claims of seeing inside the human body. And no, it's not the plot of the latest blockbuster.
It's even wilder than that. We're talking about animal magnetism,
Yeah.
a craze that swept through Europe in the 18th century.
Animal magnetism. It's a term you might have heard whispered in history class, but we're digging deep into the why behind this forgotten fad.
And trust me, it's a wild ride.
Our sources for this deep dive are a collection of excerpts about the history, the practice, and even the cultural impact of this phenomenon. We're talking firsthand accounts, scientific papers, even satirical plays poking fun at the whole thing.
Because it really captured the imagination. But to understand animal magnetism, we need to rewind a bit, go back to a time when understanding of the body and mind was very different.
Set the stage for us what was going on back then that allowed an idea like this to take root and flourish.
So picture the 18th century, a time when knowledge of the human body was still shrouded in mystery. This was a time when vitalist theory was all the rage.
Vitalist theory.
Basically, the idea that living beings possessed a unique life force, a kind of mystical energy field.
Ah, okay. I'm starting to see where the magnetism part comes in, even if it's not the kind we see on refrigerators.
Exactly. Now, enter Franz Mesmer, a German physician who took this concept of life force and ran with it. He coined the term animal magnetism, believing this force to be a universal fluid that connects everything.
Hold on, he could actually control this invisible energy? How?
Well, he believed he could manipulate this fluid within people to heal them. Imagine this. Mesmer used contraptions called baquets, basically tubs filled with iron filings. Patients would gather around, sometimes holding iron rods, to receive this magnetic energy. It was quite a spectacle, as you can imagine.
It sounds more like a scene out of a Jules Verne novel than a doctor's office. But people believed this could cure them.
Oh, absolutely. Mesmer's treatments were incredibly popular, drawing huge crowds. He was convinced that illness stemmed from blockages in this magnetic fluid flowing through the body.
Okay, so to heal someone, he had to unblock them. Was there a special magnetic diet involved, or?
Not quite. Mesmer believed in inducing a crisis, a state of intense physical reactions to restore balance. Think convulsions, sweating, even fainting.
Wow, that's intense. I'm getting secondhand anxiety just thinking about it. Wait, didn't some patients claim to have, like, perfect vision during these episodes?
You're right. Some even claim to be able to see inside the body during these crises.
That's wild.
It really is. And it speaks to how, in the absence of scientific understanding, people try to make sense of what they're experiencing.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You invent connections that might not actually be there. It's like our brains just can't handle the unknown. We have to fill in those gaps somehow, even if it means inventing things. But even if those claims of seeing inside the body were later debunked, it does make you think about the power of the mind, right?
Absolutely. And that brings us to a turning point in the story of animal magnetism when skepticism started to creep in.
Well, yeah, not everyone was buying into the hype, I imagine.
Not exactly, especially not the scientific community. Imagine you're a physician, trained in traditional methods, and suddenly there's Mesmer, waving his hands over iron tubs, claiming to control invisible forces.
Talk about a challenge to authority. You're basically telling these scientists that everything they thought they knew was wrong.
Exactly. And Mesmer's popularity just added fuel to the fire. It all culminated in not one, but two royal commissions formed to investigate his claims.
Two! Wow, that's serious. They brought out the big guns for this one.
They sure did. We're talking some of the brightest minds of the era. Even Benjamin Franklin was involved. They had one job: figure out if animal magnetism was the real deal or just elaborate trickery.
So what was the verdict?
Well, they agreed that there was no such thing as this magnetic fluid.
Case closed. End of story. But wait, what about the people having those really intense physical reactions? What did they say about that?
It's actually pretty interesting. They acknowledged that people were experiencing something during Mesmer's treatments. Physical sensations, altered states of consciousness. It was undeniable.
So what, did they just write it off as mass hysteria or something?
Not quite. They concluded that the power of suggestion, the mind's influence on the body, played a huge role.
Ah, the placebo effect. We're starting to see the connections to modern medicine here.
Precisely. This is where the concept of the mind-body connection really starts to emerge, an idea that still fascinates scientists today. But the story doesn't end there. While all this scientific debate was happening, animal magnetism, was also taking center stage, literally.
You mean like on the theatrical stage?
Exactly. Plays satirizing animal magnetism became wildly popular, like this one, Animal Magnetism, by German playwright Friedrich Anton Mesmer.
No relation to Franz, I'm assuming.
Right, no relation. But it just goes to show how this idea had seeped into popular culture. People were fascinated.
There's always something about satire that helps us process new and sometimes scary ideas. Any memorable zingers from these plays that stand out in our sources?
Well, there's this one scene where a so-called magnetic doctor is justifying his patient's deaths by saying, "Is it not natural to die?" As if it were just a normal part of the treatment.
Yikes, that's pretty dark humor.
Yeah, but it shows how people were starting to poke fun at the whole thing, even back then. But animal magnetism wasn't all laughs and stage plays. It also reveals a darker side, especially when it comes to anxieties about power and control. And those fears were amplified during this time.
Well, yeah, this was the late 18th century, right? The French Revolution was turning everything upside down. I can't even imagine how unsettling that must have been.
Absolutely. Think about it. Mesmer's treatments involved a lot of close physical contact, which naturally raised concerns about potential abuse. And in this climate of social upheaval, well, let's just say those anxieties were running high.
It's interesting how the idea of mind control pops up during times of social change and uncertainty.
It's like projecting those anxieties onto something new and unknown. In fact, even Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the famous English poet, got caught up in it.
Oh.
What did he say? He accused William Pitt, the British Prime Minister at the time, of being a political animal magnetist.
Wow. Accusing a politician of mind control. Talk about a scandal.
Right. It seems like every generation finds its own version of that fear. But even amidst the controversy, animal magnetism sparked something important. It got people thinking about the power of the mind in ways they hadn't before.
So even though the idea of animal magnetism itself faded away, it left behind some big questions.
Absolutely. Questions that would eventually lead to new fields of study, like, I don't know, maybe something like hypnotism.
Yeah, hypnotism. It's like animal magnetism planted a seed, but not the kind Mesmer was thinking about. So who were the folks that took that seed and ran with it?
Well, two names come to mind right away, Abbé Faria and James Braid. They were both captivated by those altered states of consciousness we see with animal magnetism, but, and this is important, they wanted to bring a more, how do I say this, a more scientific approach to it all.
Less about invisible fluids, more about the mind itself. What were their big ideas?
Okay, so Faria, he was a Portuguese priest, interesting guy, and he challenged this idea that trances were caused by outside forces. He's the one who introduced Oriental hypnosis, emphasizing the role of the subject's own mind. It was a huge shift.
So no more mysterious energies, it's about the power within each person. How did Braid build on that?
He took it even further. Braid was a surgeon from Scotland, and he's actually the one who coined the term hypnotism. He wanted to distance himself from all the, well, let's be honest, the outlandish stuff surrounding mesmerism and really focus on what was happening in the body during those trance states.
So he was looking for a physical explanation.
Exactly. For example, he observed that staring at something for a really long time could trigger a hypnotic state, like there's a physiological reason behind it.
They were really pioneers, taking those early observations about animal magnetism and pushing them forward. It's amazing to think that a theory that was ultimately debunked could lead to actual breakthroughs. We've gone from magnetic tubs and claims of X-ray vision to, well, foundation of modern hypnosis, all thanks to this one strange chapter in medical history.
Makes you wonder, what will be the animal magnetism of our time?
What ideas or practices that seem a little out there now will have people in the future looking back and saying, wow, they were onto something?
And maybe even more importantly, it reminds us to keep an open mind, but also a critical eye.
Just like those royal commissions, we've got to be willing to investigate new ideas, even if they seem strange at first. Who knows what we might discover?
That's what makes this journey of discovery so exciting. Until next time, keep asking questions and stay curious.